Welcome to Session 7, Movement Leaders and Churches. These are foundational to cultivating God's kingdom movement. We're going to look at the qualities of movement leaders and the qualities of movement churches. So turn to page 25 in your conversational guide. Movement leaders. Movement leaders are not positional leaders, as in institutionalized systems. No, movement leaders are actually doing things and getting things to happen. We've identified 5 levels of movement leadership. The first is that every person involved in a movement is a seed sower and a disciple maker. Every single person. So we don't have members who are doing nothing. In movements, all are involved in sowing gospel seed. All are involved in simple, reproducible processes of making disciples. And then because we're all involved in that, all believers are actually involved in church planting. Upon all who believe, God has placed the burden of raising up new churches. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be leading a church plant, but will be participating, encouraging, and involved in the process of gathering new disciples into new communities of faith. Now let's get this very clear. Every believer in a movement is involved in these 2 levels of leadership. All involved in seed sowing and disciple making, and all involved in some way in church planting. Of course, you have those who are the church planters, who are the leaders or the teams who are cultivating this movement. The third level are those who are church planting multipliers, those who are committed to equipping church planters and teams and multiplying church plants. Now, the church planting multipliers, they are also involved in gospel seed sowing and in making disciples, and they are personally also involved in planting churches themselves. So you don't rise to a position, a hierarchical position, where you're no longer involved in those 2 levels, those first 2 levels of movement leadership. The 4th level is those who are equippers of church planting multipliers. So those who equip the multipliers, who equip and encourage and facilitate the church planting teams who are making disciples. But at that level also, all of the equippers of the church planting multipliers are also involved in gospel seed sowing, making disciples with friends, with neighbours, and also involved personally in cultivating church plants. Then you have the catalysts for movements. That's the 5th level. Those who are looking at the big picture of the work of God in a province, in a state, across a city, or across a country, the catalysts, who are strategically planning for teams to enter new areas and to multiply. But they also will be involved personally. Although they're catalysts looking at the big picture, they will also be involved personally in seed sowing and disciple making, and involved hands-on in some way, providing encouragement, participating in the gathering of new disciples, in planting new churches. At no point does a movement leader move beyond making disciples or planting churches. In movements, everybody is involved. There is participation at all of these levels. Now, what I'd like you to do in your groups for the next 15 minutes is spend time in the application section on page 25, basically asking the question, what will we do about this? How do we develop an action plan where all of us are movement leaders? We're sowing gospel seed, we're making new disciples, we're planting churches, we are church planting multipliers, we are equippers of church planting multipliers, or we are catalysts for movements. I want you to look where you fit in, each of you into the levels of movement leadership. How are you involved in making disciples? How are you involved in sharing your faith? How are you participating in gathering new believers together into a new church? Those will be really important for movement leaders to consider. I want you to spend the next 15 minutes exploring these questions on these issues on page 25, and then we'll continue our discussion.